put on here, so bear with me for a second. I'm Jim Bender. I'm the Assistant City Engineer at Hagerstown. And what I wanted to speak about today, a lot of it is going to overlap what Shannon spoke about in her presentation. Maybe not as technically on the permit side and talking about what the state is doing, but trying to put a focus on it from a municipal perspective, what we're seeing in Hagerstown, what some of the challenges are, and how we're going to go about trying to implement some of these Mdl requirements. I think everybody's aware of the goals of Mdl. Basically, we're just trying to reduce the amount of nutrients and pollutants in the runoff. That's supposed to improve the water quality in our local streams and rivers, and ultimately it's going to improve the water quality of the bay, hopefully bring it back to a state of health where it was before. But like any endeavor, there are challenges in trying to do this. Some of the challenges are sort of global or statewide, I would say. Obviously, the biggest challenge in trying to comply with Mdl implementation is the cost. It's very expensive to implement all these practices trying to reach those pollutant reduction goals. A lot of times the money's non-existent, it's not there, or in Hagerstown's case, there is money allocated in our CIP budget, but it's not nearly enough to get to a full implementation, similar to what Shannon was showing on her graph of Frederick County. Another reality is in Maryland, and especially here in Western Maryland, there's the more regulation that you put on, the more hoops that you make a developer or a business jump through to locate in Maryland, the less likely they are to come to us, to come to Maryland. I'm not saying that that's good or bad, it's just a reality. More regulation tends to make people move away. Also through Mdl implementation, you get into land use restrictions. Maybe not specifically written into a permit requirement, but if you look at how you're going to meet some of these requirements down the road, you're going to end up with restrictions on land, how land can be used or developed. And I think during Les's presentation coming up about accounting for growth, I think that's where you're really going to sort of hear this and put it together, because under accounting for growth, not only are you doing all the other Mdl compliance things, but there's a good chance that you're going to be getting into setting aside land to use as a credit for another piece of land that you want to develop. So in some way, you're locking away land that could be used for another use. Again, not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing, but it's a reality. Those are sort of the global things that everyone has to deal with, no matter what size your municipality are. But there are definitely challenges that are more local, and one size doesn't fit all. The challenges that Hagerstown faces in Mdl implementation are not going to be the same as City of Frederick or Cumberland or Emmitsburg or other communities. A lot of the things are the same, but there are always sort of unique little factors that come into play depending on where you're at. And I just want to go through a couple examples in Hagerstown of what we have to deal with. One is the age of our infrastructure. Later this summer, Hagerstown's going to celebrate its 252nd anniversary. It was founded 252 years ago. We don't have any infrastructure that's quite that old, but especially on our stormwater, storm drainage side of things, we have infrastructure that's more than 100 years old, and this is an example of one of the things that we deal with in Hagerstown. They're basically old tunnels that carry stormwater throughout the downtown part of the city. We call them brick arch drains. They're basically just stacked stone walls, and then they build a brick arch, boarded brick arch over it. It's a tunnel that carries water through downtown. They run under streets, they run under buildings, they run everywhere. It's not easy to know exactly where they're running or when you're going to run into one. The challenge is when you're looking at doing some sort of a retrofit project, or you want to go into an area and try to siphon off some of this contaminated runoff, take it somewhere else and do treatment on it. It's one thing to go into a new development and try to break into a nice round new storm drain and siphon water off and do something. With these brick arch drains, they really like to be left alone. You don't want to touch them unless you have to. They're strong. They've held up for more than 100 years. But as soon as you start disturbing those stone walls or that brick arch, the stability of the whole thing starts to go away. So if you're looking at trying to do retrofits and dealing with these things, it's going to be very expensive, very challenging to effectively work with that. Another challenge that I think is more unique to municipalities than it is maybe to counties is what I call development density. These are two photos of a 20-acre area each. The one on the left is a 20-acre sort of suburban residential development that was built in Hagerstown about 15 years ago. The photo on the right is a photo of downtown Hagerstown Square, again 20 acres in size. On the residential development on the left, it is a fairly dense residential development for what we typically see, fairly small lots, but the thing that you notice is around all those houses, there's lawn or there's some green space, and you actually have open space area that's either used for play fields or it's actually, in this case, a stormwater management area. On the downtown photo, I didn't calculate it, but I'd be willing to bet that in that photo, we're over 90% impervious, probably like 95% impervious. And the other factor in that is that there just isn't any vacant land in the downtown core or that area where you can do a retrofit project very easily. You don't have space to go build a new stormwater pond or do something on the surface. You may be able to do some things underground. You may be able to do small-scale practices, which is what the ESD regulations are asking for. But it's a real limitation. You just don't have the space to do these practices where you really need to do them most, where the runoff is being generated. Now, another challenge that we all face is public buy-in. That's statewide, but I think there's some unique things about Western Maryland, too, that come into play. Statewide concern is we're talking about nitrogen and phosphorus, and when they're in stormwater, they're dissolved, and they're, for the most part, invisible. It's not like going to a gas station during a rainstorm and looking at the runoff coming off the parking lot, and you see that sheen of oil and gas. Pretty much anybody can look at that and say, that runoff is contaminated, or that's a bad thing. You can't really see nitrogen and phosphorus in this runoff, so it's not something that people are aware of. It's not something that they focus on. They don't connect just sort of general runoff with the problem with stream quality. Distance to the bay is a big challenge that we have in Hagerstown, and I grew up on the edge of Garrett County, and I can tell you that when I was growing up, the Chesapeake Bay meant about as much to me as Gulf of Mexico or Lake Erie. I knew that there's a big body of water out there somewhere, but I didn't get to see it very often. It didn't mean that much to me. It's hard enough in Hagerstown getting people interested in improving the stream quality of Antietam Creek or the Potomac River, which are here nearby, let alone a body of water that is by car about 100 miles away. So that's a challenge. Another challenge in Hagerstown that you may not have in other municipalities that we do is a lot of the existing stormwater management ponds and facilities, in fact the majority of them, are privately owned in Hagerstown. The city doesn't own them. We have maintenance agreements with those property owners. Those property owners are responsible for maintaining their ponds. The city doesn't really have anything to do with that. That's great when you're talking about budgeting for city maintenance of things, because that's not a city maintenance responsibility. We don't have a line item in our budget to maintain these ponds. The flip side is when you're looking at doing Mdl compliance and retrofits, we've got all these private stormwater ponds out there. A lot of them would be great candidates to do a retrofit project on, but that takes us back into the realm of dealing with private property owners, possibly getting easements, making new agreements with those property owners to go into their pond and do a retrofit. In a lot of cases, when you approach a private property owner and say, I want to retrofit your pond, they'll say, you're welcome to do that, but at the end of your retrofit, you're going to maintain it. And so that's the challenge for the city that we have to deal with, trying to figure out how to deal with these private stormwater ponds. Political and economic realities, I'm preaching to the choir here, I'm sure, but for Hagerstown, we saw Shannon's information for Frederick County. Using the same ME estimating tools, our cost between now and 2025 to meet the Mdl Goals is about $210 million, which we don't have $210 million to do that right now. As Shannon said, we are a phase 2 community in Hagerstown, and so is Washington County. And in some ways that's good, in some ways that's bad. Being a phase 2 community means that we haven't had the reporting requirements and the other mandates that Shannon and the phase 1 communities have to deal with. We haven't had our feet held to the fire to comply with specific requirements in the permits. The flip side of that is without having a phase 1 permit, or having a phase 2 permit that really has a lot of specific requirements in it, it's very hard to get people, citizens or even our elected officials, to focus on bay cleanup as being an important issue or a higher priority than some of the other things that we're working on. Perception that the urban sector is being unfairly targeted, you hear that all the time. In Hagerstown, what I often hear is, yes, I know that we've got oil and pollutants going into our storm drain and it's going into the river, but that's not what's killing the bay. It's all the agricultural uses in Pennsylvania dumping stuff into the Susquehanna River, and that's really what's killing the bay. So it's a challenge for us to try to make people understand that, okay, maybe the allocation between what the urban sector is responsible for and other sectors, that may not be quite right, but we all have to play a role in trying to meet these goals. Financial constraints. The city is obviously struggling right now, trying to balance our budget. We're contemplating some sort of a tax increase, a fairly significant tax increase, although that hasn't been finalized yet. Because we're a phase 2 community, we haven't been required to implement a stormwater fee, but frankly, going ahead when you're looking at $210 million, I don't see any way that the city's going to be able to avoid charging a fee, even if it's not a mandate. We just don't have other revenue sources readily available to try to generate that kind of capital. And the last issue really does speak to Western Maryland, competitive disadvantage. In Western Maryland, the state's only one county wide. And so we have neighbors 10 miles to the north here in Hagerstown and 10 miles to the south that are different states. So again, the more we regulate Washington County, the more burdens that we put on here, the less attractive we look to a new business or a developer who can, within 10 minutes on Interstate 81, be in a different state with different requirements, maybe doesn't have the regulatory load that we do here. So those are some of the challenges that we share or that we deal with in Western Maryland. What are the most cost-effective ways to try to address those? I'm not saying that we have all the answers. A lot of this is going to overlap what Shannon went over, but here, as of right now, here's the strategy that Hagerstown's trying to do, and I'm glad that Shannon picked up on this. We feel that this is the most cost-effective way to do TMDL implementation. It's definitely take advantage of all the programs and things that you're already spending money on. Don't spend new money if you can take credit for things that you're doing. Hagerstown does have a pretty robust street sweeping program that does count for credits in the Bay model. We're removing some of the sediment pollutants before it can get into the storm drain. We do quite a bit of tree planting. We get grants from DNR and Chesapeake Bay Trust, do a lot of street tree planting, and we also get into public participation by doing tree planting days with middle schools and other groups. You may be doing some of that in your jurisdictions as well, but you can get credit for those. That fourth can be increased in the Bay model. Not a very good picture, but the city has some facilities that we operate, mainly a golf course and a couple larger active recreational parks where we do the turf management. And so we have implemented our own nutrient management program for those properties. We don't try to over-fertilize. We do soil testing to try to make sure that we're adding only the right amount of fertilizer and not too much so that it doesn't run off. We're looking at possibly expanding that program to include the Board of Education sites that are within the city. I need to talk to them about that. Eventually, urban nutrient management may be something that we try to get all the residents in Hagerstown to buy into, but there's some logistical issues with that, and we're not at this point exactly sure how much credit we would get out of that in the Bay model. The other thing, without spending any money, is to take the time to review what's in the Bay model right now. What do they say about your municipalities? Have they factored in all the stormwater facilities that you already have, all the tree planting that you've done? We've gone through over the past couple of years and found that we've got a lot of things in Hagerstown that aren't reflected in the model. We're working to try to get those things that exist on the ground, get them into the model and reduce our obligation as far as other reductions that need to be done. Shannon said working with partners is a vital thing. If you have to spend money, the best way to spend money is share the load and spread it out. So we do quite a bit of work with the local county conservation district. They are a very good source of sometimes funding, but a lot of times this manpower and doing the legwork to help us implement projects, to organize projects. We also support and work with some of the local environmental advocacy groups. This is bottom photo, actually both of them I believe are the Ankeny Watershed Alliance. We've worked with them on stream cleanup days and on streamside buffer plannings. And if you can energize and activate a group that's already out there to partner with and help you meet your goals, it can be much more cost effective than trying to do it yourself. Obviously, we're looking for money in lots of different places, and there are grants and loans out there, but you do need to dig for them and you need to fight for them because there's basically one pot of money and everybody is trying to get money out of it. But sources that we've used in the past and been successful in getting grants, DNR through their forestry program, that helps to fund through grants a lot of our street tree planting program. Chesapeake Bay Trust also, we've gotten money for tree planting from them. We also got a Chesapeake Bay Trust grant to do a study to identify stormwater retrofit projects in the city, and talk a little bit more about that in a minute. They're usually a very good source of money. There's a fairly small match usually with them. So they've been a good partner. We recently just got a grant from the Chesapeake and Atlantic Coastal Bay Trust. They have a pretty big grant program, money available to work on stormwater management projects and other things that improve the health of the bay. And that's, for Western Maryland, I wouldn't have thought that we would get money from a program that says Chesapeake and Atlantic Coastal Bays. But actually, in talking with the program manager, he said, "Oh, Hagerstown, that's great. We want to get you money because that'll let us put a red dot on the map in Western Maryland for when we spend money." So just letting you know that may be a consideration. Don't be afraid to apply for money from these agencies. And then there are also Section 319 funds, Act 319 funds available through the EPA and through the state. We have not really taken advantage of those funds. The match on those funds is usually a little bit higher than some of the other programs. I think typically it's a 30 or 40% match, local match to what they're going to provide. It is money that's available if you're in a situation where other money is not available. Certainly, we'll pursue that. Okay, so you've worked with partners, you've taken credit for things, but now you still have work to do and you need to spend money. And what we've been contemplating here in the city is a series of stormwater retrofit projects. We did that study, or had that study commissioned to identify about 40 different sites where we could do retrofit projects, and we're going to use a grant to implement 2 of them. This is one. It's on the south side of a portion of the Hagerstown Industrial Park. It's a small section of the park that never really had any stormwater management. We have city-owned property just to the south where we have an opportunity, see it highlighted there, to build a little bioretention area and divert the stormwater from that industrial park into this bioretention area, treat it, remove the pollutants, and then pass it on downstream. In that study, identifying retrofit sites, we ranked the different sites. This one was chosen mainly because we can build this on city-owned property. We're not looking to acquire land or get an easement. That's an important consideration, again, because you need space to build these things. So we're trying to focus on, as much as we can, publicly owned land to do these things, but we're going to swiftly run out of public land as well to do this. Another strategy that we're starting to work on is part of the Green Street movement. Green Streets is pretty broad. It's supposed to develop streets in a way, and it's also known as complete streets, where you are trying to take care of everyone's needs, pedestrian needs, vehicular needs, bicycles. But as part of that, you can also incorporate some of these little stormwater management features as well. And these are two examples, again, not from Hagerstown, but just general examples. You can do things with curb bump outs at intersections and make stormwater planting beds or stormwater filters, build them into the bump outs. You can do linear green strips along streets. It enhances both the pedestrian feel of the street and provides some stormwater management benefits as well, adds to the tree canopy. We're trying to incorporate more of these on a small scale in Hagerstown as we do other projects, but it's a challenge. At the end of the day, the title of this section was, is it reasonable? The mandate's reasonable. Like a lot of things, I think it depends on how you look at it. I think everybody agrees that trying to improve the health of the bay and improve water quality is a good thing. I don't think anybody is going to say that's not a great goal. When you weigh that against having to provide basic services like fire service, police service, trash pickup, maintaining existing parks, and the money that, there's one pot of money, do you spend it on those services, or do you spend some of that money trying to do TMDL implementation? Is it reasonable? I'm not going to say yes or no, but I think that's something that every municipality has to decide on their own. Thank you.